So I'm guessing you all know VMware View, or at least have seen virtual desktops. Because we're quite constrained on time, I would like to talk about what's new in our latest version and the things we've changed in the past year. So one of our main things is our new protocol. It's called Blast. And with Blast Extreme, basically we use H.264. And in our latest version, we improved our quality levels. We reduced the bandwidth. And we now support to apply smart policies. We will see some of the smart policies later when we discuss UEM, our User Environment Manager, for the settings. But basically, it's controlling the amount of bandwidth that will be used according to the network you're on. The other thing we now support is NVEnc. NVEnc is the NVIDIA encoder. So if you have graphical cards in your servers, we can actually leverage that to encode our video. We do the same on the client side. If you have hardware that's capable of decoding H.264, we can actually decode that, even with Linux. We now also have support for Wacom tablets. And in Tech Preview, we now also support the Raspberry Pi and the Universal Client for Windows 10. Another new thing we added is support for the Tesla M10 card. So with NVIDIA's Tesla cards, you can actually have physical graphics shared between virtual machines. We used to have only the M6 and the M60. We now also support the M10, which is especially a good card if you have a high user density. So with an M10, you can get up to 64 users per card. So if you have a system with 4 cards, you could go up to 256 users per server. One of the main things we've introduced in the last year is just-in-time desktops. And this is our new cloning technology. So if you have a virtual desktop and you want to be able to clone it really, really quickly, what we actually do is that we stun the VM in memory, and we clone from memory. And we can spin up 1 VM per second with this new system, which is really, really quick. The only thing is, because this is used for non-persistent systems, you need to know how you manage your applications and how you manage your settings, which is what we'll show you in the next part. This basically talks about the persistency of our machines. And we used to have persistent machines and non-persistent machines. And what we're trying to get at now is a state that sits in between. So we are not doing persistency on a VDI level, but we're trying to accomplish a persistency on an application and on the settings and on a profile part of the environment. Another thing most people don't know is that we actually support Linux desktops. And we not just support them, we now can also do automatic desktop pulls. We've got full single sign-on integration for Linux. And it's really easy to deploy this in large scale. Distributions we support for Linux are Ubuntu, Red Hat, CentOS, NeoKilin, especially for China, SUSE, and then especially 11 and 12. One of the main features we've added in the last version in Access Point is our entry point into your environment. It's basically an appliance that runs in your DMZ. And one thing we added there is that we can now have a single access point or a cluster of access points, which will actually allow access to all our services. So it could be Identity Manager, it could be AirWatch, it could be View. You just have one single set, and you have a single point of entrance. The other thing it's capable of doing, it's capable of port sharing. So you only need a single external IP, and you just need a couple of ports, because port 443 will be shared for our display protocol, for all of the services you see here, and you just need 2 additional ports for AirWatch, and that's all you need from the outside. Another thing that's very important for us are hosted applications. So we started doing hosted applications in Q2 2014, and we've invested really, really heavily on it. So as you can see, during the years, we added more and more and more features. Things like printing, smart cards, USB storage, multimedia redirection, file type associations, now even up to USB redirection. And for us, it's a really important thing. We think that if people would like to move over to cloud, that it's a lot easier when you're using at least some hosted applications, especially if you have low latency applications between your backend and your front end. We now have a basically a full feature set. So we've got 3D available for hosted applications. We allow HTML access, so you can actually access the environment without even using a client. We fully support Windows Media, communications, and we now also allow URL content redirection. The whole idea of URL content redirection is that when you open something up in VDI or in RDSH, something heavy, something like YouTube or something like that, that the actual content is being streamed back to your endpoint, and the browser of your endpoint pops up, and it's actually decoding and playing from there to have less strain on your server environment. What we also added to RDSH is image management. So you can have a single master, and we can clone this out, and we can do that dynamically. So based on your load, we can actually spin up more or less RDSH servers in the background, which will be automatically created. The other thing is, because we're doing image management, it's really easy to patch and to make sure that your current environment keeps running while you're doing the patching, and just move people over later after the patching is done. For the RDSH client, we now also support printers, scanners, smart cards, webcams, microphones, and that's a high-level redirection, so it works on an application level. But if you want to, we can still do generic USB redirection for things like signature pads or barcode readers or pin pads. One thing we added in not the latest version, but the version before, is that we support parameter pass-through. So your RDSH application can now receive parameters from the client. We can do the same thing in our HTML client. In the URL, you can actually pass in parameters to your RDSH application. So if you have your own portal and you would have an application that you would like to start up with different settings, you can just pass in parameters, and they will be displayed.
Okay, let's see. It's still working. I would like to show 3 other products to you. Again, due to the time, we can only do a high-level overview. The first one is probably the product you all know already. That's ThinApp. This is our application virtualization technique. And what we do here is we decouple applications from the operating system. By doing that, we make sure that we break any dependency you have on the operating system, so that you can very easily migrate to other operating systems or move between desktops. And we containerize the applications by using ThinApp. The benefit of this is that it works on physical, virtual machines, doesn't really matter. Deployment is very easy. It's a 100% success rate because it's just an executable that you have to start. A ThinApp package is put together into one executable. And the good thing is you can run multiple ThinApps next to each other without any conflicts because of the isolation we add here. Basically the same as any other application virtualization technique. Why is this a different solution than other solutions? We don't require a client. A ThinApp application is just one executable, as you can see here. It's a compressed container, an executable that you can just start, double-click as a user. Inside that container runs a virtual OS with its own kernel, etc. And that virtual OS, inside that OS, the application is running. So it's completely separated from the Windows version that you're running on. Inside this virtual OS, of course, there's a virtual registry and a virtual file system that the application is using. And if you look from the virtual application to the physical machine, you will see a merged view of the virtual registry and the physical registry. So from the application perspective, it runs native on the OS, so it can use all functionality of your OS, like drive mappings, printer mappings, it can all use that. But from the OS, the application is isolated and cannot conflict with other applications or DLLs. And the nice thing of this is that you can very easily just remove the operating system, migrate from Windows XP to Windows 7, migrate to Windows 10, and keep your existing applications. They will just follow you as a user. Key benefits of this, it's agentless. You don't need to deploy a ThinApp agent on your OS. It's just the executable that you can run. There's no backend infrastructure required other than a file share. So simply put these executables on a file share and you're good to go. The applications run in user mode, so you don't require local administrative permissions or other elevation techniques. You don't need to install anything. It's just run and execute. And it's very mature technology. ThinApp 4.0 was already introduced in 2008. And it's still being evolved. ThinApp 5 was released last year with support for Windows 10, etc. So there's still development going on for this product, making sure that customers can continue using this technique. It's specifically very nice on RDSH environments, because that's the environments where you typically run into application conflicts. And because of the minimal infrastructure requirement and the fact that it's agentless, it's very easy to deploy on your RDSH server. And it also supports memory sharing, so it's a very resource-efficient technique that you use on your terminal server. So if you have multiple users working on the same terminal server, running the same ThinApp application, DLLs that are being shared are only loaded in memory once and will not take up more resources on the terminal server than needed. So that's about ThinApp. Another product I would like to show you is user environment management. This is a product added to the VMware end-user computing stack recently by an acquisition. And this is all about managing the user and the user profile. So your applications are deployed using ThinApp or maybe even app volumes, which I'll cover after this. But then when a user logs on, there's another step that needs to be taken care of, the user profile. Each application has user settings, like the very easy example, the wallpaper of your Windows, but the same thing applies to Outlook. You have your personalized signature and other stuff like that. UEM will take care of that and will make sure that you can log on as a user, roam between Windows sessions, and everything will follow the user. The nice thing about UEM is also that it uses a very lightweight infrastructure. It uses file shares in the back end and a GPO to configure, and that's about it. There's no database or web server required. So it's a very scalable and very enterprise-ready solution. We have customers running this in environments with over 100,000 devices without any scaling or performance issues. So what you'll see here is that UEM can take care of the user part, the user profile portion of the user. The applications can be deployed using app volumes from your AppStack, from your storage area network directly. And your operating system can be a linked clone. So the complete stack will be managed by VMware products, and UEM is just the last part running on top of there, making sure that the user has his documents and all his personal settings. When are you looking at something like UEM, why do you want to use it? There's lots of reasons. If you have a lot of scripts running at logon to make sure that the user gets the right drive and printer mappings. If you have lots of GPOs that you find very hard to maintain or to target to the right user. If you want to decouple application settings from your applications, you can also use UEM, because UEM can deploy application settings independently to the users, independent from the way you deliver your applications. So whether you use ThinApp, app volumes, MSIs, even AppV or other techniques to deploy the applications. Most customers also want to deploy user settings. For instance, when a user starts application in Germany, it should be configured with German language settings. But if a French user starts the same application, it should be configured in French language settings. Those user settings can be deployed with UEM independent of the application. So it's a very flexible way of doing that. It also creates a backup of your user profiles. You can always restore your settings and go back to the settings from yesterday. And out of the box, it supports migrations. So if you migrate from Windows 7 to Windows 10, with UEM, the user profile will simply follow the user. It's compatible between Windows versions. So the user never loses his personal settings when you do an upgrade of your OS. It's a very dynamic solution that not only manages the user profile, but can also manage user environment settings. So anything that you typically do by group policy preferences or logon scripts or group policy objects can also be done in UEM. Think of settings like printer mappings, drive mappings, ADMX-based settings. You can just import the ADMX templates for Office into UEM and deploy them. Horizon Smart Policies, as Hilko already mentioned. That's a way of dynamically making sure that a user has the right redirections available in his Horizon session. So when you connect to a VDI session or a terminal server session, the smart policies make sure that you can use your USB redirection or your client drive redirection, or the bandwidth of your PC over IP profile is being limited because of the way, the location you're connecting from. So it detects who you are, what location you're connecting from, and based on that information, you can determine that's secure, so I'm going to allow redirection, or it's unsecure, and I'm not going to allow redirection. We have an application feature, a feature called application blocking. We can stop certain applications from being launched by users. And again, we can deploy application settings to the users. And this is all, this works between any kind of desktop, physical, virtual, even from the cloud. And it works very dynamic, based on conditions. What we do is also we optimize the logon experience. We make sure that the logon time is as short as possible. So we do a lot of things in real time. That means that at logon, when a user starts his desktop and he logs on, only a base Windows profile becomes available, like a mandatory or a local profile. Directly after that, UEM starts at logon and will load only the Windows settings, like your wallpaper, maybe you change your mouse to left-handed. That's the only part of the profile that will be loaded, so it's going to be very fast. And only when a user starts an application, like Adobe Reader, at that point when he launches the application, we will access the file share, load the settings for that application, and launch the application. So it will only load the settings that you need in real time at the moment you want it. And as soon as you're done with the application, you close Adobe Reader, it writes the personal settings back to the file share. That also means there's no boot storm at logon, but also at logoff, we only have to write the same small Windows settings back to the file share. The rest is already being taken care of as soon as you close your application. So it's a very efficient way of managing the user profile. The last part I want to discuss is application distribution. We've already discussed ThinApp, which is application virtualization. We also have a product called App Volumes, which can be used for application distribution. What we do here is, well, this is a traditional way of managing applications. You have an OS, you have your files as a user, and on that OS, applications are installed, like Firefox, Chrome, Adobe Reader. What App Volumes does is it puts an agent between the OS and the applications, and it allows you to attach applications in real time. So that means that as soon as a user logs on, we know who that user is, and we only attach the applications that the user needs. As soon as you log off, the applications are detached, and the user cannot use them anymore. So it's delivery of applications, and it's very fast. It's almost instant, a matter of seconds. How does this, what does this do? This allows you to use complete application lifecycle management. It's very easy to deliver an application, but also to pull back an application and deploy a new one. So just update your application, make sure it's ready for your users, and at next logon, the application will simply switch to the new version. You can manage applications logically based on business requirements. We group applications together based on a role or a department. So for the engineering department, you have 10 applications. We group them together. We attach them at logon, and that's that. So based on departments, you can very easily deploy applications with App Volumes. And as mentioned, an update takes place immediately at logon. You can create an update and make it ready. And as soon as the user simply logs off and logs back on, the switch happens and the new application is available. So how does this work? We use virtual disks to do this. We've developed this for VDI environments. It also works on terminal servers, and we're even building this to work on physical devices right now. But let's start with virtual. What we do is on your VDI machine, your virtual desktop, we simply attach a second virtual disk and a third and a fourth. And on that virtual disk, the applications are installed. So how do you create these virtual disks with your applications? We call that provisioning. And these virtual disks are called AppStacks. We simply have a provisioning agent That's the same agent you use for your production machines. So just install the agent, switch it to provisioning mode. It will create an empty disk, AppStack. And then as soon as you've done that, you can simply install your application. Next, next, finish. We capture what you install. And all those changes you make will be written to the virtual disk. We call them an AppStack. During this process, that disk is in read-write mode, so you can make changes. All the changes to your system will be captured there. Simply install all your applications. Once you're done with the application installation, you click Finish. Then we make the disk read-only, and we put it in the central management server ready for deployment to your users. We also have a second disk option, and that's writable volumes. These AppStacks for application delivery, you can assign multiple to a system and to a user. We also have a writable volume that can change or capture changes made by the user. So if a user is allowed to install its own applications or makes other system changes, we can capture those user changes on a writable volume, and that writable volume will simply follow the user. So if a user has a VDI machine and installs some applications, he logs off and logs back on the next day, but gets a fresh VDI machine. The writable volume gets attached again, and all his user changes are back. So it's a way of capturing any changes made by the user. And this writable volume is a one-to-one link to users. So there can be only one writable volume to a machine, and each user will have its own individual writable volume.
Should settings not be written to your profile instead of the virtual disk?
Yeah, the question is, should settings not be written to the profile instead of to a writable disk? This writable volume is intended for a use case we call user-installed applications, like developers or other users that are local administrator on the machine that are allowed to install applications. And those system changes will be captured on the writable volume. Any user changes in the user profile can probably better be managed with UEM. You can use a writable volume template to also capture the profile, but UEM is more flexible and allows for easier roaming and between different OSs. Yeah. And last but not least, we can deliver these applications not only to VDI, but as mentioned, also to RDSH and also to Citrix environment. If you have your Citrix XenApp servers or your Xen desktop VDI machines, you can add this technique as well and start using it. There's a couple of limitations. Windows 2008 and 2012 R2 are the only supported OSs right now. Writable volumes cannot be used on terminal servers because the disk is shared between the whole system. And if multiple users start writing to one volume, that's not going to work. So that's the only limitations there. But it's a very good technique used to deliver applications instantly to terminal servers. Just provision your terminal server, attach the disk that you want, and they are available to you instantly. There you go.
So the last product I wanted to talk about is Workspace ONE, which is a bit odd because it's not a product, it's a suite. But one of the main components in Workspace ONE is Identity Manager. So let's talk about Identity Manager within Workspace ONE first. So the whole purpose of Workspace ONE is to have a single entry point. And the idea is to be able to access any app. So it could be a web app, it could be a native app, it could be a remote app. And then share that and make that available across any device. So it could be a phone, a tablet, or a browser. What's also included inside our suite is AirWatch. And I'm pretty sure most of you will know AirWatch. AirWatch is an EMM solution. And the other thing we want to be able to do with AirWatch is to keep a barrier between your work and your personal. So that could be your apps. So you want users to be able to install their own apps on their phone, but you don't want them to be able to interfere with the work ones, and vice versa. But it's also true for the data. You want your corporate data to be secure, but the user should be able to store its own personal data as well. So the idea is to keep barriers between each and every one of them. And last but not least, you would like to allow IT to manage and to secure those apps and those data. So what we offer with AirWatch is a browser, an email client, and a content locker, which are all fully secure. On top of that, what we also offer is Socialcast, which is our instant messaging and, what's the correct term in English?
Yeah, social network.
Yes, so social media kind of thing within your corporate environment. And we have a video, sort of SharePoint kind of integration. So Boxer is quite an intuitive email client. It looks quite similar to the Mac built-in client. The main change is that it's fully integrated with everything else, and it's fully secure because it's containerized. But it supports swipe gestures. You've got loads and loads of quick options for quick replies. You can access your calendar, and you can create smart folders. So Content Locker is our data storage point, and you can make your data as secure as you want. You can actually decide which users can access it, what they can edit, what they cannot edit. And of course, you will be able to search and create offline access. Another thing you can do with Content Locker is that you can actually edit your documents while you're in Content Locker. So you can edit PDF, you could do annotations, you can edit an Office document, and you can add metadata, and it's quite easy to add new content in there. So our browser, combined with our AirWatch solution in the backend, can also allow you to get access to your internal web apps from the outside. Highly secure, contained within this single browser, so nothing will leak out. And we offer single sign-on support across all sites and all web apps. Collaboration was the word I was looking for. It's our collaboration app, Socialcast. So it allows you to have a secure chat. It can integrate to your business systems, and you can do collaboration. Whenever you deploy AirWatch, one of the first things the users will ask, the two things are, what is AirWatch and how important is the privacy and what can the company see? So whenever you deploy AirWatch to all your users, they will be able to visit the site internally, which will explain exactly what IT can do and cannot do, and what AirWatch could do for them. So the idea of the Workspace ONE suite is to be able to manage all endpoints in a single solution with any use case and using modern management frameworks. Another nice thing you'll be able to do is, again, do policy-based conditional access. So you can actually tell what people are allowed to do whenever they're on an internal network or in a testing network, or when they're on the outside, when they're on the mobile. You can do that by defining network ranges. So I know this was quite a lot, and I know we went through it quite quickly because of the limited time that we actually have. But if we would look at the bigger picture, so the products we've seen today are ThinApp, App Volumes, VIDM, and Horizon. If you would use them individually, you would see that you would never be able to fit an entire enterprise application estate or user estate into each and every single one of them. I won't go through all of them, but if we talk about ThinApp, ThinApp does not support drivers. If we talk about App Volumes, you wouldn't be able to do single sign-on. If we talk about VIDM, you couldn't deploy native applications. If we would talk about Horizon, you couldn't do anything on the physical. And if you would use a third party or our own product for deployments like SCCM Mirage, you would not be able to do some of the features as well. However, if you start using the suite, so if we talk about Workspace ONE as a suite, if you use the enterprise version, which contains View, App Volumes, ThinApp, VIDM, and AirWatch, basically nothing would not be possible. The same on the physical side. So if you would use Workspace ONE Advanced in combination with Mirage or a third-party deployment tool, Lendesk, SCCM, name them, all the use cases should be possible. Now, one of the other problems is, what do you use for what? So, which app do you put in a particular use case? And to be honest, that's not a very easy question to answer, because it depends on nearly everything. It depends on the actual application. What does it require? Does it require low latency? Does it have specific requirements? But it also depends on the user and the user's requirements. Does the user need to work offline? Does the user prefer to use a browser? Does the user need remote access? And it also depends on your endpoints. So we did a simple matrix, but the whole idea of this one is not to choose a certain strategy. So what you see for most enterprise organizations, that they will say, we want everything to be virtualized, we want everything to be ThinApp, and everything needs to fit into that box. Usually that's not the best option. That's not the best experience for the user. It's not the best possible solution for IT as well. So what we're saying here is that you should definitely look at the application, where it needs to go through, and decide on a per app basis which of the solutions is the best fit. So if you buy the suite, you've got all these nice options, but always make sure that you follow your application. And with the full suite, you get a massive amount of options. You can make it as complicated as you would like. So you could basically, let's take Adobe PDF Creator, so the writer as an example. Technically, it's possible to ThinApp the application, to put the drivers in the base image, to manage the settings with UEM, and then do some more settings with policies, do something completely different to physical. That's technically possible, but there will never be a working solution or a manageable solution. And virtual applications and things like app volumes, they give you extra possibilities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to use them just because you have them. Only try to use them when they make sense, because it's really easy to get everything overcomplicated, and the more you use, the less easy it is to actually track an issue. If something pops up, what's the main cause? What's causing it? So in general, we recommend to keep it simple. And with keeping it simple, I mean, if you choose a solution, try to stick into that solution. If you decide to go for a ThinApp, then go for a ThinApp. And if the application has something like drivers, then probably ThinApp is not the best solution. Maybe if it's just a printer driver, you could use app volumes. And if it's not, maybe it's better to put it into the base image or to use third party to actually deploy the applications. But always try not to mix too many things up, because it gets more and more difficult. And once again, make decisions on a per app basis. And you always need to look at apps. The same goes for grouping. If you start a new project and you want to do a massive organization from start to finish, usually when people start to do grouping, they start to follow the users. And if you follow the users, you'll get lost quite quickly. Even for that, also try to follow the app. If you follow the apps, it's quite easy to map them to groups and to get something like a 60 to 70% grouped solution. And 60 to 70% is enough for a start. Then later on, you could do more. And you could do things like have multiple groups. But always make sure that the app is the thing you're following. Of course, you need to have a process in place that covers the full application cycle and that separates responsibilities. It's not that necessarily if you have a very, very small company, but anything bigger, you need something like that. And our colleagues from the other companies have multiple tools that can help you with that. And the last thing I really wanted to share with you is to think about the end user. So in the last 4 or 5 years, what I've seen at least at most companies is that they are really trying to cut down costs. And usually what they're doing is that they are making things simpler for IT and save costs with that. But if you think about it, and think about it really, really well, even the biggest companies usually have less than 10 packagers. So if you are allowing them less time to package the applications, to think about the settings, to make everything spot on for the user, you are just saving the amount of hours for those 10 people. If that application is being used by your 40,000 end users, and they all need to configure some parts of their apps, or sometimes things are misconfigured, and that's costing you time, it's not cost effective. You are saving IT money, but you're costing the business money. And basically what IT should be doing is taking care of the end users, because that's our end responsibility. So never forget to think about the end user.
Make it simpler for the end user.
Yeah.
And well, it's pretty cool. We have an end user experience ourselves as well, because we have an internal dog fooding program within VMware, which means we have to use our own applications and programs. So AirWatch is available for everybody within the company, but it's a decision. You can choose to enroll in AirWatch. I think only 50% enrolled out of themselves until we released Workspace ONE with the identity portal, which is just single sign-on, log on once, and then from that portal you have all your applications. I can click my expenses, do my expenses. I can click my email. Everything is single sign-on, automatically enrolled, etc. And once we've enrolled that, I think that the number of people choosing freely to enroll in AirWatch went up to 90% or something. So it made it simpler for the end user. So I think that's the most important piece. Make it simpler for the end user, not for IT. Of course, in the end, IT will also benefit, but yeah. Anything else?
We went so quickly that we actually have 3 minutes left for questions.
Very good.
So we can answer some now. If we do not have enough time, we will be here or at the stand to answer more questions. So are there any questions? It can't be that clear. It's so many products, so less time. You must have some questions. Or are you just scared to ask them here out loud? We'll be there later. Okay.
Well, we'll be here.
Thanks for your time.
Yep, thank you for your time.